You joined the Stormwater Asset Management, Three Essential Building Blocks Every MS4 Program Needs in 2024 webinar. My name is Chris Cappelli. I'm the president of Second Nature and have been here now for 2 years. Before joining Second Nature, I worked at Esri for 30 years. So it's a privilege to be with you today. Joining me is Nicole Beck. Nicole is the founder and CEO of Second Nature, and a scientist and PhD in aquatic sciences. We're going to cover 5 different sections for this webinar, just so you can kind of keep track. At any point during the webinar you have any questions, feel free to type those into the Zoom Q&A. You should have a button at the bottom of your screen. We're going to ask you 3 questions and share those results with everybody, just to get a sense of how everybody feels about their data and governance policies. So with that background, I thought I would then turn it over to Nicole.
All right. So a little bit about Second Nature, and thanks for joining us today. We're based in Santa Cruz, California. We've been around for 19 years. We started as an environmental science and consultancy, really with a mission to bring science to policy and decision makers. And that mission and journey has led us into becoming a technology firm, hyper-focused on tools to support stormwater management, which includes To Inform. That's our purpose-built software for state and local governments to better manage stormwater and streamline compliance. So now Second Nature, our team is a group of software developers, scientists like myself, and GIS experts like Chris. We've cultivated a great relationship with Esri. We are their premier partner for their stormwater GIS solutions. And we're growing pretty rapidly. Last couple of weeks, we just added our first customer from North Carolina, which makes it 17 states now where we have active To Inform users, which is super exciting.
It is very exciting. Thanks, Nicole. So getting into the rest, I thought maybe, Nicole, you could kind of set the framework for all this, because maintaining an accurate asset inventory with a stormwater GIS has become quite essential in most permits, hasn't it?
Yeah, we're starting to see these requirements, and they're across the country, and they take different forms. Again, we've spent a lot of time in all 50 states understanding the permit requirements and the similarities and differences. And so this slide is summarizing kind of the 2 end members. Several permits will have basic requirements, which at that is just, curate and maintain a GIS map of your MS4 system. We're starting to see more advanced, or an increase in the frequency of these advanced requirements. California is one that these permit requirements are growing, particularly the phase 2 statewide permit. So in addition to having an asset inventory, there are requirements to be able to determine and track the probability of failure, consequence of failure, assign levels of service to your assets, do cost reporting, and essentially build a long-term funding strategy. So as much as you can take a look at your permit and understand those requirements, but they do span a pretty significant range.
Nicole, could you talk more about the kind of essential assets? Because I know, coming over, from being more of a general GIS person to stormwater, I've noticed some things that are kind of different.
Yeah. I think, again, I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of my entire career to work with folks across the country, and really understand and think about what is the data model behind a stormwater system. And so, one of it is just understanding the typology and the nomenclature. So on the left-hand side there, again, this has been an iterative process, but the MS4 system can be characterized with 9 specific hard asset types. And then once you have that, component of your structure of your data, then thinking about how to build that data set out with what we'd call attributes. And so the graphics here kind of go from, less to more complicated in how that data is used. So, if you just want to, again, create that map of, the curate and maintain a MS4 system map, well, all you need is location and an asset type and a unique ID. As you go into kind of the next level of maybe more complex compliance, again, these asset management requirements that are coming out, we need to think about, what attributes do you need about those assets, and how will that information be used? So things like install date, material size, consequence of failure, how to generate that information and build out that data set. And then on the far right-hand side, which is something that's, really intriguing to me and my science cronies, is the analytics, right? How do you actually do performance evaluations, whether it's, water quality performance and volume and pollutant reductions, or even doing drainage studies or hydraulic analyses? You need additional information about those assets in that system.
Yeah, I think what I like about this is it sets the foundation, because I do think there are, like you said before, there's differences, and I don't know that there's a right or wrong approach here, but this is a good categorization of what I've definitely seen since I've been here. I think it also provides us an opportunity to maybe ask everybody for their feedback on this. So our first poll question is just launching right now. Kind of the next thing is we kind of go into what are those 3 practical strategies to improve data quality. As Nicole and I were preparing for this, we were really trying to reflect on the things that we had seen, as she said, both in my previous career with Esri, and then more specifically with regard to working with stormwater organizations around the US and the EPA, as I think Nicole mentioned. We're going to cover and kind of go through these in order: data harmonization and governance strategies, GIS technology and change management or adoption, and then filling in the data gaps. And we'll try to provide some practical tips and lessons learned. There are many parts of an organization involved in stormwater management. Obviously, you know that better than myself. And sometimes there's challenges in connecting the dots. So one of the things about data harmonization and governance, it becomes an opportunity to really shore up those connections and make them, a little stronger or a little more durable.
I'm an athlete, and I've played on teams my entire life. And the more that I have learned about stormwater programs and stormwater management, it definitely is a team sport. There are so many people involved and relied upon, and no 2 programs are the same in how they structure those teams. But right, with any good team and team success, you really need everybody rowing in the same direction at the same cadence. You need a clear strategy, you need tight communication. And so, right, if we can operate more as a unified team, then great things happen, right? You're successful, whatever that might be. So for stormwater management teams, well, now compliance is achieved, and that's likely probably more efficient and streamlined than it has traditionally been. The team's more efficient, right? You're able to use your limited resources probably more effectively. And then you're able to collaborate and innovate, right? And I know you all have been watching the news and probably living it more than myself. I'm not work for a local government, but every time there's so many impacts of the increasing intensity of storm and rain events. And that's left on the local communities to deal with flooding and continued water quality decline. So there's a real opportunity here to boost local resiliency, and think about how to better manage stormwater as a resource. And that lays all in the people who are part of your team to be able to do that. So.
Yeah, Nicole, your team analogy, I think, is so good, and it really opened the door for this next idea of documenting your team's data needs to avoid any future confusion or duplication of efforts. Do you want to say a little bit more about this spreadsheet?
Yeah. So again, we know, and we've seen this first, kind of anecdotally and talking and collaborating with stormwater programs, and now with a solution that can add all the users they need. We see dozens and dozens of people who rely upon in different roles in the stormwater program. So this is a tool that we've been using it with some of our customers to just document who are those people, right? Who are your teammates? What is their role in their business processes? What data do they rely upon? And why? And how do they how does that affect kind of their access? And that we've seen it kind of uncover a lot of understanding in internal programs to try to understand, yeah, who the organization is and what their roles are. So we'll share this Google Sheet if it's useful for y'all. It might help be a good exercise to understand those relationships.
Yeah, I think the key here is just understanding who is involved and what role they have, whether they're a consumer of the information they just displayed on their mapping, or they're more active and they have certain needs to be able to update information or update attribute information to drive a business process. I think, my learned lesson, probably like most of you, is that you sometimes find people you didn't expect. And by being able to catalog and keep this kind of simple catalog available for you, it helps keep everybody connected.
Yeah.
I think, as Nicole and I were talking about this and putting this presentation together, we kept, what are the three best practices we were going to highlight? And I think the first one really stuck out for me. It's something I've seen my entire career. And the advice I would always give people is avoid text fields in your database. Obviously they have a place. I think text fields for comments and notes are really good, but a well-designed database that uses, in the case of Esri technology, attribute domains really provides a instantaneous QA/QC tool for you. It also makes it easier for people to choose things from a pull-down list, so that you're virtually guaranteed you're not going to see what you're seeing here as an example on the left. And I think this is just it's been a symptom of how data was collected over the years and the lacking of that kind of standardized approach that Nicole mentioned earlier. So if you find your data in this situation, I want to assure you it's relatively easy to fix. It's something that could be identified and fixed with little effort. So that's the first best practice. Nicole, the second one is yours.
Yeah. So in that same, try to make the data operable and queryable. This was an example that I wanted to share. We spend a lot of time thinking about structural stormwater control measures, or stormwater BMPs is what we call them. But basically those investments, right, in reducing the volume or pollutant loading of stormwater and better managing it. And we, back now, probably 15 years ago, had a task to classify all of those structural BMPs in the Tahoe Basin, and try to provide an organization to it. So we compiled all the data sets that were spreadsheets, some with GIS, lists, manuals, design manuals, and we came up with 136 different types of structural controls. And as we dug in more, we realized, well, those are just, we're calling them, Chris likes to say tomato or tomato, but more or less it's the same thing. We all agree what a tomato or a tomato is. So working through that process, what's the function that these assets rely upon? How do they perform? What are very clear definitions? How can two people go looking at the same asset, call it the same thing? And so that functional approach of, does it detain or retain water, and is it relying upon infiltration or particle capture, et cetera? So there's a real, I think, good, and I don't know that necessarily our nomenclature approach is perfect, but it certainly has improved the communication and collaboration and consistency within and across organizations. And we've put it into a fun poster, and we'll share that resource at the end of this as well. But been a good lesson learned.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Tahoe Basin, and I know that was a very large project. Keep Tahoe Blue was something significant, and your role was pretty amazing in that. But you've also applied this same strategy across the U.S., both as a consultant and as a software person, right?
Yeah, and it stands up. And in fact, we've, made a few iterations over the years. I think last year we added a couple of different asset BMP types based on some work we did with the East Coast customers. So it is standing up, and it's been a really useful tool, and it's embedded into Inform, and again, helps that consistency across the organizations.
Well, I also know it informed the Esri, stormwater template, which was a really good effort. So I
Yeah.
think, as you've said, Nicole, time and time again, with a common taxonomy, you can move on to kind of addressing the more challenging issues of pollution and flooding. This third one kind of caught me off guard when you were mentioning it. I was thinking back to junior high when a science teacher reminded me of this. So go ahead. Give us
Yeah,
a
and it seems so obvious, but there's so many data sets that, me and the team have seen over the years that have numeric values with no unit. And so, again, it can be titled volume. Well, is it in gallons, acre feet, cubic feet, or, something else? So this is just a critical best practice, right? Collecting any of that data, particularly measured data, it's expensive. And so it loses its utility if you don't know what the units are. We're talking about assets today, so we put common units associated with stormwater assets, but as a water quality expert and data geek, when you don't know whether it's parts per million or parts per billion, or is it nitrate or nitrite, again, those are expensive data. And so this is a great practice that we could all adhere to.
Yeah. And I know you can either have it declared for the entire field, or you could put a field next to it that actually, reflects the units of the kind of have companion fields. So there's multiple ways to address this one, but it is a good thing. And I've definitely seen it in other industries as well. So these things aren't easy always. And again, nobody's data is perfect, but if you can kind of create a new standard and then migrate your data in thoughtfully, you actually build a pretty solid asset database pretty fast. I think in terms of the mapping considerations, there's obviously the approaches you can take, importing existing GIS data, digitizing existing paper maps, on-screen digitizing, commonly you see an ortho, and then you're using GIS to denote the point or the line that you can kind of visually see. Obviously, field crews and high accuracy engineering survey, I think is all valid, as is importing CAD and design files right from the plans or designs you get in when new construction's happening. So I think all those are definitely options, and later on we'll cover how to apply those various things, or at least how we've seen our users applying those strategies. I also wanted to have kind of gone back to Nicole's point about the units, is just mention this. There's this notion of accuracy versus precision, and if you're a geodesist or a photogrammetrist, don't beat me up on this. But my sense of this is, you can spend a lot of money, a lot of money, and get very precise, very accurate geospatial data. That's up in the upper right-hand corner, but you spend a lot of money to do it. Sending a survey crew out with high precision instruments, that's expensive, and I don't think most people don't have the budget for that. But if you do, that's great. So we're left with, what are the other options? I think just knowing the state of your data and being able to speak about that is an important thing. So, getting data into the system is good. Understanding that data that you have in the system and being able to discern the differences between it makes it even better. So that's what I would say, is don't get too caught up in any one of these. No data is perfect, but if you can give it some kind of documentation about it, you make it the best possible. Whereas Nicole likes to say fit for purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, and we like that term, data richness, right? Well, how confident are we in the data and its accuracy and precision? So
would formalizing or enhancing your data governance approach add value to you and your stormwater management program? So you should be seeing those now. So, it's comforting to see that, most of you answered yes, and then even somewhat. And I do think that's one of the things we're going to stress is there are organizations that really do an exceptional job of documenting their data governance processes. So it's something that there's lots of resources that we'll point out available for this. So data governance, I think it's about helping everyone to understand their role and responsibilities in the curation and maintenance and use of your data. And, as we like to do, there's a spectrum. On the left here, there's the good old back of the napkin strategy. And on the right is a formal, comprehensive strategy. And I've definitely seen both. And my learned lesson is having something is better than having nothing. And there is no judgment on anybody that has a back of the napkin strategy, because you can easily turn that into paper and share that, or digital and share that. Probably is a better way of thinking about it. So Nicole, let's go through some of these things. What are the seven? We came up with seven. You want to take a shot at one of them?
Yeah, and yeah, we've touched on a bunch of these. I mean, obviously is the stakeholders, right? Who are the people? I mean, people are critical, right? They execute the processes. So who are they and what are their roles? And then the standardized nomenclature, and just be able to communicate. That the communication, overcoming some of those barriers and challenges in the industry would be huge. So
Yeah. I think the one I'm drawn to is number three, the unique IDs for each asset. I know it's sometimes challenging because uh, they can sometimes come in from data that's being imported, and they're kind of unstructured in some regards. So I think it is healthy to have in it maybe a way of being able to document what are going to be our requirements or definition for unique IDs. And we've seen a variety. You could use the location or some combination of it. You could tie it to the watershed or sub-watershed, and there's a variety of strategies, but just having it be unique so that any given asset has a unique ID is important.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then the other two we touched on a bit already, on just the constrained and defined data fields, and really understand your data structure and those workflows. That totally helps with data quality, and makes it, Chris, you mentioned that point of data is more accurate in the field, and it's easier to enter it if you have a select number of options rather than having to kind of guess what the material is, or what units you should be putting in.
Yeah, and obviously data governance is much broader than just, stormwater or GIS. It applies across many domains of information technology. We're going to share some resources that we've found useful over the years in that regard. I think, again, the key point we want to make is documenting something is better than having nothing. It gives you the framework for being able to have a common understanding. And that's, I think, the most important.
Yeah. Well, and that one, the number 6, I think is really important. It's just having a single system, right? The stormwater the programs are managing a lot of disparate data sets. And so once you spend the time to build that single data set and harmonize your information, making sure that you're keeping that up to date and you're avoiding any sort of other disparate data sets coming in, that now you've undone all the good work you've worked to achieve.
Well, it kind of brings us to our next section on new technology and change management. I'm hoping you're chuckling over the button here. It's a real button, actually, that one of my users when I was at Esri gave me after we launched ArcGIS Online. She had gone back to her organization after the user conference and really made an effort to launch GIS for the first time in her community. And she used ArcGIS Online. And the next year she returned to the user conference and handed me this button and said she found that by giving everybody on her team a button like this exact button, that it helped really reinforce the need for change. And I thought it was such a clever strategy. It's really why I wanted to share it, is sometimes it's the simplest things that can help people really rally around and make change successful in an organization or in a team. So change, obviously there's dramatic change, kind of like going from a clipboard to a modern smartphone would be a pretty big change for anybody. And then there's incremental change. Let's say I'm using a smartphone and now I just need to update the form. So obviously change isn't just one thing. There's a spectrum of change. And this is a whole line of science and research and study around change management. So I won't, try to be an expert in this regard. What I've learned the hard way. And I will offer my own personal definition here. Change management for me, and maybe you, is a framework. It's really designed to help you, me, help others successfully alter or replace their existing processes. And it's most often associated, I think, today with adopting new technology. And as I kind of think about it, there's really, 5 common steps. And you could see this in most publications as well. There's the preparation for change. There's formulating a vision and plan. There's implementing the change and going through those processes. There's embedding those practices, embedding and practicing, actually, getting people going with that change, making sure they're successful. And then, last but not least, there's adjusting. I personally have never gotten it right the first time. Maybe that's not a good thing to admit, but I've always had to be willing to adjust and alter based on data or observations from the people that are actually, doing the work. So, Nicole, anything to add on that?
No, I would reiterate that, like, don't be afraid to try it. And then, yeah, that adjust and analyze. Once the team is part of the process, they can provide a lot of good feedback and just be ready to adjust and adapt. But the more collaborative this process, the better. Yeah.
So, as we were thinking about what were some of the lessons we've learned? Change and adoption of new technology is not easy, at least not easy for everyone. So these are some of the ideas. And, again, there's no perfect. So these are just ideas for maybe your consideration, and hopefully you find them useful. I think first and foremost, I've always learned is being able to explain the rationale for the change, not just change for change's sake, but there's something driving it. There's an aspiration to improve or to achieve. And when people understand and can rally around that cause, I find that they're much more willing and able to adopt and adapt. Offering comprehensive training and being able to give people the ability to practice is also important. Nicole, jump in here and help me out.
Yeah, well, I feel like we do this every once in a while in second nature, and it is trying to make the team more efficient and adopt digital tools for other parts of our business. And it takes a while to work through this and get everybody on the same page as to why we're doing it, and everybody have a voice and time to feel comfortable with the differences. So you're spot on here with this.
So we won't read through, all these. I think people probably have done that for themselves. But, I just harken back to being an athlete, as you said, tracking and communicating key performance indicators. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, and one of the places where we've seen the technology really provide efficiency in stormwater programs is just if you think about data collection with a paper form, that data now, when it's collected, the time that it takes to collect that data, now it has to be transferred into a different system and then somehow, iterated and put into a format that can be reported. And so, the some of those indicators, I think, are really like how much work can your field staff or your, whoever they might be, the inspectors, or even you yourself, if you're a stormwater manager, how much work can you do in a day, and how does that efficiency increase? And there's some nice little performance indicators that can really help show how much more you can do in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, and I'm gonna focus on the last one. Lead by example. In my career, I've had to roll out some fairly large systems and change some well-established processes. And I got this advice from a mentor of mine. Lead from the front and be user number one on your new system in the case of technology, so that people can actually see that you're using the system, you're leveraging the data, and you're incorporating that into how you talk and how you kind of share information. It completes this loop that's so vital in adoption of technology, where people feel seen and heard. I'm investing the time to do this new thing. Is anybody using it? It answers that question immediately. So it's a small nuance, but I thought rather important to share. These are two of the books that I know I've found very insightful in my career. The first from Harvard Press, The Knowing Doing Gap, and the second of the Phoenix Project. I think both provide, if you're so inclined, a really good insight with practical insights, that is, to help with this regard. We're going to start to think about that third section, filling in the data gaps. And I know this is one that Nicole and I spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth, because I feel like we spend a lot of time helping our users to address, with strategies and ideas. And just harkening back to the survey, I think we're not alone. We're in good company here with people all sensing that filling in the data gaps is a big challenge. So it's probably a good time for our third poll question. Let me go ahead and bring that up. Well, I'd love to know if anybody's surprised by these. Nicole, you're seeing this. What's your sense?
Yeah, well, I hope that the three of you who have your full assets mapped give us a call, because I'd love to learn from you. That's awesome. And maybe you'll be able to share some of the tricks of the trade. In general, this does align with what we have been seeing. That majority of the assets, pretty good comprehensive inventory, but understanding the attributes that are needed and how to get those attributes into the system efficiently. That's a big lift. So not too surprising here.
The fours, the threes, definitely. I think there's always that notion, especially around attributes, filling in the details, and then twos and ones. You're also in good company. I think it's been hard. A lot of programs are starting with little to no technology, a variety of data scattered across the organization. So I think, hopefully this kind of shows just really what is the state of the industry. Because, if you believe what is it, Nicole, American Society of Civil Engineers giving Stormwater a D+ grade, I think GIS technology and the good work of stormwater professionals and GIS professionals, is going to change that very rapidly. We've started to think about how could we systematically give you a few things of how we think about going about filling in data gaps. And Nicole, I think you went right for this one.
Yeah. Well, and we had a good debate about this, right? So, I was like, well, look at the map. And so, this is an example, and we see this a lot, is that, you can't necessarily, let's take catch basins, for example. You won't know how many catch basins, how many are actually out there versus how many you've mapped. But the lines, by showing your storm drain lines, either your pipes, open channels, or culverts, you can start seeing places that, intuitively, there's development, there's infrastructure, and you don't have that data. So it might be overly simple, but it is a pretty useful way to understand some of those patterns and the gaps. And if your field teams have this data in the field, so when they are going out and doing their routine inspections or maintenance, you can work into their processes to be able to start thinking about filling some of these data gaps. Lots of opportunities here, but it is a good starting place, and maybe too obvious, but.
So the next one I think was equally interesting, and that was analyzing the attributes. And that can be a chore, obviously, and there are some basic kind of QA, QC, quality assurance, quality control measures you can take. And obviously, going back to one of those best practices we mentioned before, getting rid of text fields and replacing them with domain coded fields will start to help you narrow in on some of the attribute challenges that you face. Because as we saw with the brick, The inconsistent values can be a challenge. Empty fields, obviously, and incorrect values. And if I had to go through, an order of things that were easy to harder, obviously inconsistent values and empty fields are fairly easy to spot using, Stormwater GIS tools. Just by querying your system, you can see those. Incorrect values. Nicole, any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, those are using graphs and data in different ways to query the data set and look at the ranges and the distribution of your data, and any fall outside of that can be super helpful. As well as, we on this graphic, we show kind of that progress towards full attribution. So that's, in your database, having a knowledge of what are the required versus optional fields, and making sure that that is part of the, the digital tools and the QA process that you have. To go back to the lack of units, that makes it hard, but you certainly can do plots of data distribution and find outliers. And, it takes time, but it's worth spending the time to clean up and understand where your data is. And that'll help you go forward with your strategy to fill it.
And, number 3, there's a lot on the slide.
Yeah. So this is, now if you've harmonized data, right, we're starting to understand what the gaps are and where they are. You'll see this again, right? Nobody has perfect data. And so that becomes a journey, and just spending some time to have a thoughtful strategy as to how you're going to fill that. And we put up a bunch of different types of criteria that we have seen groups rely upon. I don't think everybody follows the same process. So this is a little bit of big buckets of information, and beyond compliance, right? There's always a regulatory requirement. So of course, compliance is a big one, and think about making sure you're meeting those requirements. Aligning with city planning priorities, and what is your city doing? We've seen a lot of groups who have, if they're redoing master plans or doing revitalization efforts in disadvantaged communities, by having high quality stormwater data, now you have a seat at the table. And to go back to, we're increasing frequency of higher intensity storms, flood hazards, big issue. If you can come to the table with your city leadership and be able to talk about the considerations of stormwater while they're revitalizing some of the areas in the city, that's pretty exciting. Right now, you're starting to influence change at the local level. So,
I had a suspicion you were going to do that, because if you hadn't known, Nicole was joined by Heidi from the city of Salinas for an Esri webinar, I think back in November, and it was just remarkable to see Heidi's journey. To exactly as you said, having a seat at the table. Stormwater is now helping to drive the strategy of city leadership. And I think that's so important. The next obvious one was, select the collection method most appropriate for the needs. So it's not necessarily a one size fits all, but there obviously are categories. So work you can do in the office with you or your team. And one I've definitely seen people use a lot is looking at the orthophotography and being able to stare down and locate assets, or even adjust the location of assets to better fit those. There's the good old Google Street View, which is exceptionally useful. I would never put past, importing CAD files, and I know Nicole has a favorite on this list.
Yeah. Again, all the tools in the toolbox, and getting your team to efficiently improve the quality of your data. The subdivision plans have been something that we've, in the history of the development of your subdivisions in your cities, have become really useful. One key attribute that is needed for asset management is install date. So your options, if that's really hard to do either from office work or even in the field. So the alternative is trying to dig through the plans, or building a subdivision kind of history, if you will, with the plans and any sort of aerial photography. And if you just assume that the infrastructure went in at the same time of that subdivision, and you intersect using those polygons, it's been a really efficient way to get some key bits of information about assets.
And you kind of mentioned the next natural one, field work. I mean, the ability to take a smart device, a tablet, PC, or phone or tablet into the field is, I think, changed the game for many people. And in terms of filling data gaps, as you're going about doing your normal field work, whether that's inspections or construction or maintenance activities, the ability to be able to, take a moment or a bit of extra time to fill in the missing details, is definitely a strategy that a lot of people use. So too is, scheduling up work, during the summer times when you're able to get interns and train them, that provides a way to be able to put people out into the field to go collect missing information systematically. So that's definitely something that people use. And of course, going out with your own crews is an effective way, in a targeted sweep, so to speak, and doing a field survey for a neighborhood or an area, and harkening back to the prioritization, slide, those areas that are most important for you to fill in the gaps. And then, obviously being able to contract outsource work from contractors, or I've seen job programs used in many cities to both, create an opportunity for the programs and be able to bring in new employees, but to help grow skills. And I think that's really a great thing. Student projects is another. I've seen many university cities leverage student projects with a partnership with a professor to be able to augment information in the field. And last but not least, community efforts. Adopt a storm drain or something akin to that. So I think these are all valid strategies that you have to fit different data needs and gaps that you have.
Yeah, no, I like it. I guess with the contracting work or anybody else, the one note of caution, right, is to make sure that they follow your data governance policies so that you don't end up with more siloed data after all the hard work that you did. But training and, again, having those policies and procedures in place, it makes it a lot easier to expand the team efficiently. So
yeah, that's a great point. And it harkens back to one of the very first things you said is, that's notion of having a standardized data model is so important, because it really sets the foundation for everything else. And I know, as we were talking, Nicole, this maybe is a bit of a cliched slogan, but it seems very accurate. Maintaining an accurate asset inventory is a journey. It's not a destination. Any final thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, and I think that's one of the reasons why we went, one of the motivations behind creating a technology solution for this industry is that, it is living data, and, doing a snapshot in time and writing a report, and developing a strategy, it's like, then something happens 3 months later. And so being able to have the processes and the protocols in place to make that journey efficient, super, valuable to everybody involved, and ultimately valuable to the local community whose service you provide.
I know, Nicole, we're going to start to wrap this up. So what we wanted to do was just take some time today to share what we thought were 3 practical strategies to help you improve the quality of your asset data. Please know that we are available, just if you have questions or you want to share your own experiences. I think what's so valuable about this community is its willingness to share and be open with one another as people learn and evolve and try new things. We've put together, a series of resources that we have. We have Stormwater GIS set of resources. The poster that Nicole mentioned is available on that right now. There's also a few videos and other things on that. Nicole and I started actually offering this just at the end of last year. We've only done it a few times, and we are just now really rolling it out to offer a free GIS assessment. And I'm not going to promise you the world, but between Nicole and I, we will jump on a call with you and listen and kind of help you share what's working and what are some of the areas in your program where you're trying to give more thought or give more effort. And we'll do our best to kind of collate those ideas and help you kind of lay out a strategy. It's not a big investment of time and we think we'd like to think it can help. So that offer exists. And then last but not least, we are going to make all the resources and the things that we were alluding to available. Watch your inboxes for the links to the recording, that data inventory spreadsheet that we share, the asset poster, and the other resources that we have. And, last but not least, please feel free to email Nicole or I if you have any questions or feedback or comments. Nicole, any last words?
No, that was fun. I look forward to what comes next. So thanks everybody for your time.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us today.